1. As Alexander Thompson dug deeper into the Shadow Syndicate, she uncovered a web of secrets that threatened to destroy everything she held dear. +2. Ethan Hall's phone rang, shrill in the dead of night, with a chilling message. "Meet me at the old warehouse, if you want to live." 3. Victor Vex's eyes gleamed with menace as he uttered the words that would change the course of Alexandra's life forever. "You're getting close to the truth, reporter. Too close." 4. 5. When CEO Emily Lee's body was found in a deserted alley, Ethan Hall knew that the Shadow Syndicate was just getting started. The aftermath of the 9/11 attacks was a time of unprecedented chaos and destruction. The city was in a state of shock, with emergency responders racing against time to rescue those trapped in the rubble. As the nation mourned the loss of thousands of innocent lives, a mysterious fire broke out in a Manhattan high-rise, killing 5 people. The incident was initially thought to be a tragic accident, but as investigators began to sift through the ashes, they discovered a cryptic message scrawled on the charred remains of the building's wall. The fire had started on the 23rd floor of the high-rise, which was home to several financial firms and investment companies. Witnesses reported seeing a figure fleeing the scene, but the individual was never apprehended. The fire department's initial investigation suggested that the blaze was caused by an electrical malfunction, but the discovery of the cryptic message raised suspicions that the fire may have been intentionally set. As the investigation continued, detectives began to interview witnesses and review security footage. One eyewitness reported seeing a person in a black hoodie lingering around the building's lobby earlier that day. Another witness claimed to have seen a suspicious package being delivered to the building's mailroom. However, despite these leads, the police were unable to identify a suspect or motive. The cryptic message found at the scene only added to the mystery. The phrase, "The truth will rise from the ashes," was scrawled in red ink, seemingly as a deliberate act of defiance. Detectives wondered if the message was a reference to the 9/11 attacks, or if it was a hint at a larger conspiracy. As the investigation continued, the police were left with more questions than answers. The city was still reeling from the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, and the mysterious fire only added to the sense of unease. The media was filled with speculation and theories, ranging from terrorist attacks to government conspiracies. The public was on edge, wondering if the city was safe and if the authorities were doing enough to prevent further attacks. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation into the mysterious fire continued to unfold. Detectives followed up on leads, interviewed witnesses, and analyzed evidence. But despite their best efforts, the truth behind the fire remained elusive. The cryptic message found at the scene seemed to mock the investigators, hinting at a deeper truth that remained just out of reach. As the investigation into the mysterious fire continued, detectives began to notice a disturbing pattern. A string of similar fires had occurred in the months following 9/11, each targeting high-rise buildings and leaving behind identical cryptic messages. The authorities were baffled. struggling to connect the dots between the seemingly unrelated incidents. The first fire had occurred in a financial district high-rise just a few blocks away from the World Trade Center site. The second fire had taken place in a residential building in Brooklyn, and the third in a commercial complex in Queens. At first, the fires seemed like isolated incidents, but as the investigators delved deeper, they discovered a chilling connection. Each fire had been started on a different floor, but the damage had been contained to a single area. The fires had all been reported to have started in the early morning hours, when the buildings were least occupied. And, most disturbingly, each fire had left behind the same cryptic message: "The truth will rise from the ashes." "I'm making our way to the library," Philip said. "Now," Bellamont said, back overcome by anguish. The similarities between the fires were too striking to ignore. Detectives began to suspect that they were dealing with a serial arsonist, someone who was deliberately targeting high-rise buildings and leaving behind a signature message. But what was the motive behind these attacks? Was it a twisted form of revenge, or a desperate attempt to send a message? As the investigation continued, the police discovered that each of the buildings that had been targeted had one thing in common: they were all owned by the same real estate conglomerate. The company, which had a reputation for ruthless business practices, had been embroiled in several high-profile controversies in the past. The detectives wondered if the fires were somehow connected to the company's shady dealings. Were they being targeted by a disgruntled former employee, or perhaps a rival business seeking to discredit them? The more they dug, the more complex the web of motives and suspects became. The police were under pressure to solve the case, but the lack of leads and the cryptic nature of the messages were making it difficult to crack. The public was growing increasingly anxious, wondering if they were safe in their own homes and workplaces. As the investigation continued, the detectives knew they had to work fast to uncover the truth behind the mysterious fires and bring the perpetrator to justice. As the investigation into the mysterious fires continued, detectives began to unravel a complex web of deceit and corruption that reached the highest echelons of power. The real estate conglomerate that owned the targeted buildings was found to have a history of shady dealings, including bribery, embezzlement, and tax evasion. The company's CEO, a charismatic and well-connected businessman, had a reputation for ruthlessness and a talent for manipulating those around him. He had built his empire through a series of savvy deals and strategic partnerships, but rumors of his questionable business practices had long been circulating. As the detectives dug deeper, they discovered that the CEO had ties to several high-ranking government officials, including a senator who had received large campaign donations from the company. The senator had also been instrumental in passing legislation that had benefited the company's interests. The web of deceit and corruption seemed to grow more intricate by the day. The detectives found evidence of a complex money laundering scheme in which the company had funneled millions of dollars through offshore accounts and shell companies. They also discovered that several key employees had been intimidated or bribed into silence, further obscuring the truth. As the days passed, several days passed, they targeted two other sponsors. As the investigation continued, the detectives encountered a cast of characters who seemed to be hiding secrets. There was the company's CFO, who had a history of cooking the books and seemed overly nervous during questioning. There was the senator's aide, who had been acting suspiciously and seemed to be in constant communication with the company's CEO. And then there was the mysterious figure who had been seen lurking around the buildings on the nights of the fires, but seemed to have vanished into thin air. The detectives were determined to untangle the web of deceit and corruption, but it seemed like the more they learned, the more questions they had. Who was behind the mysterious fires, and what was their ultimate goal? How far did the corruption reach, and who else was involved? The investigation was about to take a dramatic turn, one that would lead the detectives down a dark and treacherous path. As the detectives continued to dig deeper, they uncovered a shocking conspiracy that went far beyond a simple case of arson. It appeared that the mysterious fires were just a small part of a much larger scheme, one that involved corrupt government officials, corporate executives, and even organized crime. At the center of the conspiracy was the CEO of the real estate conglomerate, who had been using his company as a front for a massive money laundering operation. The company had been buying up properties and businesses, using the cash to fund a variety of illicit activities, including bribery, extortion, and even murder. The CEO had also been working closely with the senator, who had been using his position to help the company secure lucrative government contracts and subsidies. In return, the senator had been receiving large campaign donations and other favors from the company. But the conspiracy didn't stop there. The detectives discovered that the company had also been working with organized crime figures who had been providing muscle and intimidation to help the company get what it wanted. As the detectives dug deeper, they found evidence of a massive cover-up, with multiple government agencies and officials involved. It seemed that the conspiracy had reached the highest levels of power, with even the FBI and CIA involved in the cover-up. The detectives were shocked and outraged by what they had discovered. They knew that they had stumbled into something much bigger than they had ever imagined, and that they were now in grave danger. Despite the risks, the detectives were determined to see justice served. They worked tirelessly to gather evidence and build a case against the conspirators. But as they got closer to the truth, they realized that they were running out of time. The conspirators were getting desperate and would stop at nothing to silence them. The detectives knew that they had to act fast before it was too late. They made a daring move, going public with their findings and exposing the conspiracy to the world. The reaction was immediate and explosive, with the public demanding justice and the conspirators scrambling to cover their tracks. The detectives had sparked a firestorm, and now they had to see it through to the end. The detectives' decision to go public with their findings sparked a media frenzy, with news outlets across the country picking up the story. The public was outraged, demanding justice for the victims of the conspiracy. As the pressure mounted, the conspirators began to crack. The CEO of the real estate conglomerate was the first to fall, arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, bribery, and murder. The senator was next, resigning from office in disgrace as the evidence against him mounted. But the biggest surprise came when the FBI director was forced to step down, amid allegations that he had been involved in the cover-up. The CIA director soon followed as the conspiracy's tentacles reached into the highest levels of government. As the dust settled, the detectives were hailed as heroes, their bravery and determination praised by the public and the media. But they knew that their work was far from over. The investigation continued, with new leads and new evidence emerging every day. The detectives worked tirelessly to build a case against the remaining conspirators, determined to see justice served. Finally, after months of work, the case was ready to go to trial. The conspirators were charged with a range of crimes, from fraud and bribery to murder and treason. The trial was a sensational media event, with the public packing the courtroom to see justice served. The prosecution presented its case, revealing the shocking extent of the conspiracy. The defense argued that the conspirators had been motivated by patriotism, seeking to protect the country from perceived threats, but the jury was not convinced. After deliberating for days, the jury returned a guilty verdict, convicting the conspirators on all counts. The judge handed down severe sentences, with the CEO and senator receiving life in prison. As the conspirators were led away in handcuffs, the detectives felt a sense of satisfaction and closure. They had solved the case, exposing the truth and bringing justice to the victims. But they knew that the case would have far-reaching consequences, shaking the foundations of power in Washington and beyond. The detectives had uncovered a web of deceit and corruption that went all the way to the top. Their work would be remembered for years to come, a testament to the power of courage and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. The truth had been revealed, and justice had been served.